Ses. Ses.
Aç oradan bir de yükselt oradan. Ha bu sıkıntı olur. Yani bak oradan gelmiyor. Şey geliyor ses geliyor.
Ses.
Tamam çalışıyor.
You have to grab a chair.
Fiyakalı çıkalım, okey.
We have the last one, Luigi. Luigi, where's Luigi? Luigi,
Yes?
you haven't sent me your CV, so
No.
can you write down a few statements about yourself? I haven't received it. I sent you an email.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. But,
Konuşma sırasında nasıl
my
yapıyorsun?
CV is very long, so I would say just Vice President of Telecom Italia and Chairman of that.
Okay, very good.
Network.
So you're VP of
The word is
Telecom
spent
Italia?
Huh?
VP Telecom Italia.
I'm the chairman here, but I'm speaking here on behalf of ETMA, the chairman of the European Telecom Operators Association.
Okay, very good. Belirtilmiş konuşma süresi 1 dakika. Imagine that European telecommunication, organization.
Telekom. Birbirimize yardımcı olalım.
Kavga çıkarsın, kavga çıkmaz. Çok sağ olun. Bayağı önemli.
Yerleşik şirketlerin küçük şeydir. Canavar bir İtalyanlık. Benim dışarıda falan çok izledim. Denedim mi? Etno diye bir şey var. İşte işte Trans Telekom, İthal Telekom, Türk Telekom. Büyük operatörler.
Yusuf Hocam, Türkçe, İngilizce ona göre translation gerekirse diye.
Valla ben İngilizce de konuşabilirim.
İngilizce yapın. Bir order olarak o zaman nasıl başlayalım? Önce hanımlardan başlayalım şöyle. Tamam. Ladies first.
I would like to welcome you all to the host country session. The name of the session is Policies for Enabling Broadband, and the special focus on OTTs and level playing fields. This is, I think, one of the important sessions in this forum. The title of the forum, the session, as indicates, it's about the broadband services, but more importantly, as we all know, these over-the-top services and fair rules for competition is very critical in the past few years of internet. And this is actually, I was told a few days ago by the organizers that this host country session will be a feeder session. Some actually feedback will be generated here, hopefully. So it will be a feedback session for the network neutrality session, which is one of the main sessions of this IGF Internet Governance Forum. Today I have very distinguished speakers with me, panelists. One gentleman from UK just sent me an email last night. He had some health issues with his family. Mr. Prodromos Tisiavos from London School of Economics. He will not be here today with us. So we'll have 7 very distinguished speakers, some from abroad, some local speakers, from industry, NGOs, private sector, and we'll hopefully discuss all the issues regarding broadband, over-the-top services, fair competition, and leading these discussions to network neutrality. Now, I would like to open the floor with a representative from Yandex. As we all know, Yandex is a new portal. Before introducing her, the rules of the panel will be 7 to 8 minutes talk, and I think we have a panel here indicating the time. And once the speakers, panelists are finished with their presentations, we'll open the floor for discussions. And I was also told that there will be some contributions from social media, and I don't know how I will get that. But if there are other contributions from social media, I don't know how I will get it, but we will try to address those questions as well. Milena Juricic. Okay.
It's okay.
She is with Yandex Turkey, just joined Yandex from Google, where she worked for 8 years. She left Google as regional director for DoubleClick. Prior to Google, she had her own IT company. She's an entrepreneur, obviously, based in Belgrade, Serbia. She's born and educated in Belgrade, lived in Athens, and for the past 4 years, she lives in Istanbul.
Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you. You have 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, it's my pleasure. Should I?
No, I think you have to. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody can hear me? So, hi. So, thank you very much for the nice introduction. I'm very happy to be here. As you just heard, I just recently joined Yandex. Basically, I joined on Monday morning, and I started talking at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I didn't stop since. So if my voice stopped working in the middle of the presentation, I apologize in advance. So as I said, I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to give maybe a bit different spin on the discussion. It's not going to be that controversial, and somebody would maybe like in order to steer the discussion. Basically, all technology companies, Yandex, are there to somehow in the middle of the supply and demand, right? So our mission is to provide easy and rapid access to the wealth of information and give the answer to every possible question. If you look at the Yandex, who was established in 1997, broadband for sure influenced a lot the way how this content, which is organized and accessed via internet, content changed, and the way how people consume content is also changed. Therefore, we are also changing the way how we are providing our services to our users. And as broadband is providing this augmentation of the services, we are very happy actually that this is a challenge for us to provide new services in order to service our customers in the better way. So basically in the recent years, do-it-yourself concept is becoming something as a standard, right? People want to choose what they watch, they want to choose what they listen, where to watch it, and where to listen. Therefore, there are no anymore like favorite portals, or there are less of them. And people are searching, people are browsing and using isolated islands of the content. And this content can be various, from text to video. Therefore, the broadband is the driver that provided this change in the way how the content is consumed. And one of the biggest change in content is online video, and I'm sure that we are going to talk more about video as the most important OTT service. Majority of traffic is now video, and the traffic is increasing. The way how video is consumed and how video is searched is changed, and we as technological company are also challenged into how to present this video in the proper and the searchable way, in a different way than the traditionally text websites were indexed and searched. So we are happy to announce that we are working on the very new feature of the Yandex video search, which basically presents videos in a different way and organize it in a different way because the consumed content is changed. So this is when we are talking about the video. When we are talking about level playing fields and the whole fairness, again, this is where I said that we are pretty, we are somewhere in the middle, and we believe that we are providing the fair grounds for everyone, because broadband is now providing people with the opportunity to browse more, to search more, to explore more, and to find the applications and content of their choice. We as a technology company who has to provide them the access to the information, we are trying to be as neutral as possible. Algorithms are there in order to understand what is the most valuable content to the user, and therefore the barrier for the level entry is much lower, and people can search for the niche content and access it. So this is when we are talking about we are talking about the supply side. When we are talking to demand side, this is something that maybe I will more say as my personal opinion, is that this is somewhere where we have to be very careful. On one side, supply is changing. So all content that we are seeing, or majority of the new content and what the startups are investing, are rich in content, rich video, rich images, rich media in general. And people who don't have broadband cannot access this content. So the question here that I have, that we can maybe discuss later, is how we plan with using the proper policies. We are planning not to make the digital divide even bigger than it used to be, because the more content is created that is rich, that means that people who don't have the proper services, they cannot really use it. What we are doing, we are again as a technology company trying to provide ways how we can still deliver this content. I think probably people in the audience know our turbo feature in our browser, which are enabling people who don't have broadband internet still to access rich content. So we are trying to do that, and of course we know that all this new content and new features that are coming are extremely important for the economy and the opening the new jobs, etc. But this is not something that I'm going to talk about. I think that my colleagues will have much more to say. So I think that I'm pretty well on time and pretty well with my voice as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, very good. We saved 2 minutes. Now, we heard the voice of private sector. Now, I would like to give the floor to one of the very important NGOs of Turkey, Telkoder. Then we'll jump to government, so I'm going to switch between private sector, NGOs, and government. Mr. Yusuf Ataarak, sitting on my left, is a good friend of mine, my colleague. A very short introduction of Mr. Arak. He graduated from Middle East Technical University, my alma mater, with BS and MS in electrical engineering. Right after his graduation, he started working at the Electricity Authority of Turkey. Afterwards, Aryak participated in Istanbul electricity distribution network development. He was also active in politics. He worked as a deputy mayor and secretary general at Ankara Metropolitan Municipality after 1977 elections. He was the first secretary general working at Turkish metropolitan municipalities. He had some government-related work as well. After 1980, he worked as a board member. He switched to private sector, Ant AŞ, and later at Eser Telekom, where he still works. But more importantly, he is one of the founders of Telkoder. It's the Turkish Competitive Telco Operators Association. He has been the chairman of Telkoder since its foundation in 2002 for 12 years. Telkoder is now the main non-governmental organization of competitive telecom operators and ISPs in Turkey. He is also the president of Telecommunications Assembly of TOB. That's the Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchange of Turkey, an important NGO. He still serves as the chairman of Eser Telekom. The floor is yours. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. I would like to make a short speech about the topic today we have from the point of view of alternative telecom operators. We all aware of the fact that everything is going to internet. Radio, direct mail, print, TV cable, everything goes to internet, and internet goes to everybody. As far as the telecommunication operatorship and the content is concerned, in the last maybe 10-15 years, the atmosphere is fully converged audiovisual world. So I can give you some figures to make you maybe more familiar with what is going on. In Europe, in the green paper prepared, we can see that the videos, data, video on-demand services, pay TV services are increasing enormously. And for example, in Europe, there are 306 video on-demand services. This means the infrastructure to carry this traffic has to be improved very rapidly. And in that point, we should be quite careful. Again, all this content is created by OTTs. Just a second, there is a mistake here. Yeah. So this on this sketch, you can see that IPTV and pay TV is growing enormously, especially in North America, West Europe, East Europe. In all countries, content generation is enormously increasing. And as a result of this, OTTs are becoming more and more important, generating more and more money, and operators, telecom operators, have to invest more and more. In this context, OTTs have some relations and very important topics with electronic communication side and broadcasting side. I am mostly talking about electronic communication side, because for the broadcasting side there is nothing much to say. As a result of this relation between OTTs and electronic communication side, there is a very important thing we should be aware of. The revenues of electronic communication companies all over the world is not increasing in the last several years. In Europe, for example, 2010, 11, and 12, in this chart you can see that the revenue of operators is almost stable. There is no increase. And also, when you look at the revenues in Turkey of the total operators' revenues, starting from 2010 until now, in dollars term, the revenues are not increasing. It is about around $16 billion. And as far as 2014 first 6 months, the figure is again the same, about $16 billion. So OTTs are getting bigger, more stronger. They are using the infrastructure of operators, but operators are not making big revenues, or they are not able to increase their revenues. And of course, this should have something very much related to OTTs and operators and the both sides position against taxes against government authorities. And there is if OTTs are getting stronger and operators are staying still, we can say that possibly there is a big contradiction here, and OTTs, without paying any taxes, without being subject to any rules, they are doing their business, but operators are subject to very high measures, taxation, etc. We see unfair competition here.
You have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Telcos, heavy taxes, various regulations, legal interception, sanctions. OTTs, no taxes, no regulations, no legal interception, no sanction. So you can see here the taxes that operators have to pay. And I think this is a very important subject we are going to be talking about a lot in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the good introduction. I think you have a very good slide. The slide just before your last slide gives an important distinction between OTTs and operators. On one side, there are no taxes, sanctions, legal implications. On the other side, the operators had to endure serious taxes, infrastructure requirements. And having said so, I'm going to give you the floor to one of the international operators sitting on the very left hand of this table. Sorry for actually keeping you apart from the table. He is Mr. Luigi Gambardella. He represents ETNO, the Chamber of European Telecommunications Authority. At the same time, he is the Vice President of Telecom Italia, one of the largest operators in Europe. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Gambardella and try to get his views on how, as an operator, for mobile and fixed services from both a private sector perspective that he represents, and also I think he works in an NGO in Ethno. So his views will be very valuable for us, how Europe is actually approaching this problem. We know that US has different tariffs, regulations. Maybe a good comparison with US and Europe could be well. The floor is yours. You have 7 minutes. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, yes. Sometimes technology doesn't work. When it works. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation, and I'm also happy to see that there is a big delegation here in Istanbul of many European telecom operators. And this is very important because it shows our commitment to work together with the internet community, with and many people that are involved in the discussion of internet. And I was accepted to speak, but I'm very happy here also to listen to the other, because I think that here is more for us an occasion to listen rather than to speak. Let me say a few things. Apart one correction to the previous speakers, I don't know where you get your data, but I can tell you that the revenue of European operators went down in a very significant way, and we're not stable at all. But maybe we can discuss this later.
So it's basically going down, not flat.
No, down, and everybody knows that. I can give you all the numbers, and unfortunately for us, in the last 5 years, the revenue of the operators went down significantly. But I have just a few points. The first one is because about this story of telecom operators over the top, be friend, be enemy, war, battle, peace. So I think that it's not only about that. It's not about that. Personally, I realized that I have many friends in the internet, among the internet players, and maybe even in the telecom. So to be friends, to be enemies, is the issue. Here there are some commercial. Here we're speaking about commercial company. The internet company are not for-profit company. On the contrary, they are commercial company like we are. And sometimes you can have commercial discussion. It's quite normal that this happens. What is important to find, I think that one of the main messages that I got here, the meeting, several meetings I had, is I feel that there is a completely different atmosphere. And there is, first of all, is much more relaxed, maybe because Istanbul is so beautiful that everyone is so happy to be here. And this is influencing in a very positive way also the way we are discussing. But I see that there is a very positive atmosphere. And what we want is to find a win-win solution. So what we need is, we are not against, the problem is that OTT are not our enemy. We have to realize and recognize that there have been some changes. There are some problems, and we have to solve this problem. But I think that in doing this, we should not always refer to us. So means, because I don't see how many people they care about telecom operators or internet players. But let's put customers, the customers, citizens, people, at the center of our policy. And we have to start from them, what they want, and we have to address their requests. Now, what I think is clear from our point of view, what we would like to see, obviously open internet, but we want to see more choice, more freedom, more services, and this is what we should try to give to the customer. And and also, I think in doing that, we have two objectives. We should take care of two also issues. The first is that how we can grow, how this ecosystem can grow. And second, how we can sustain the growth of the infrastructure, because if there are no infrastructure, there is no possibility to have such kind of services. Now, let's me now introduce the argument of level playing field, which I not say that we have invented, but we many years ago we started in Europe to discuss this, and it's something that it's also our fault if we are using this. What we are intending for this? First of all, let me clarify. We are not asking for more regulation. The last people who are asking for more regulation are the operators, because we don't like regulation. We would like to see a reasonable regulation, but we don't want to see an excessive regulation. So we are the last people who are asking for. But obviously, what is happening that due to the changes of the market, of the technology, of the services, the things are different today than they were a few years ago. And everyone recognized that. Now, what is happening? That the customers, the citizens, they have access sometimes to the same services that are offered by over-the-top or telco, but the same services are regulated in a different way. And what we are saying here is when we are confronting with the same service, we should have the same rules. Maybe we could find a way to reduce a little bit the regulation for the telecom and to give some rules to the over-the-top. Because at the end of the story, what is important? The protection of the consumer, the protection of the rights of the citizen. And they have to be sure that when they use a service on the net, whatever is provided by a telecom operator or internet players, whatever is in the world, has a certain level of protection. So, and I think that in this respect, we have to continue to work together and try to find the solution. What we don't accept that we keep asymmetries and we keep such kind of situation, as I said, which not only us, but also consumer can be damaged. And maybe then in a second round we can address other issues like net neutrality or other issues that you would like to discuss further. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gambardella. We are good with time. We heard the voice of a telecom operator. Actually, what he was proposing, as I understand, is more like a soft hybrid solution, not very strict. And he's saying we are not enemies with OTTs. But at the same time, there are regulatory issues in OTT issues. As you may be well aware, in the US, in the United States, FCC has actually had a legislation treating all traffic equal, but then a federal appeals court, I think a few months ago, struck down this rule, saying that he has no business in actually treating traffic equally. So in the US there has been many discussions. In the European side, part of the ocean, there are also discussions. So now I would like to give the floor to someone from the regulatory authority of Turkey, and let's hear what he would say. Mr. Beytullah Kuşçu. He is the acting head of sectoral research and strategy development at Information and Communications Technologies Authority of Turkey. In Turkish, we call them BTK. BTK's chairman was sitting in front. I think he left for a few minutes, but he'll be back because I will He will be back because I will have questions for him once the session is finished. So Mr. Kuşçu is an engineer by profession. He graduated from Çukurova University and holds a BS degree in electrical engineering. He also has a master's degree in economic regulation and competition from the City University of London. He started his professional life in 1998 as an engineer, worked as an ICT expert since 2004. He's been serving as the acting head of sectoral research and strategy development department in BTK, or ICTA in English. He is experienced in regulatory activities, so I believe he will have more to say on how a regulatory authority sees this problem for Turkey and also for global operators. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, distinguished participants. I would like to talk about regulatory approaches to OTTs. But before that, I want to say a few words about the relationship between OTT and broadband. Let me start by sharing only 3 statistics from Turkish broadband market. The total broadband penetration was less than 1% in 2004, but it reached to 50% in 10 years. The mobile internet traffic increased 10 times in 3 years from the second quarter of 2011 to the same quarter of this year. And the data revenue increased 15 times in 5 years from 2008 to 2013. We see the similar developments in the other countries related to the development of broadband and we see these similar developments in the other countries related to the number of broadband subscribers and increase in the data traffic. And parallel to this development, OTTs and OTT services are also growing explosively. I will not talk about much more about the statistics, but it's clear that OTT service continues to penetrate to all of the citizens which have smart devices and which have access to broadband. And with the introduction of more speed broadband technologies such as LTE or LTE Advanced, it's expected that the OTT applications much more easily will be delivered to the consumers by these high-speed technologies. But there are also some research that OTTs also contribute to the revenues of the operators. By 2019, research shows that by 2019, 40% of the revenues of the operators will come from the data services, and most of this revenue will be generated by the OTT applications. Seeing the developments of OTT services, operators and regulators are trying to handle the problem, and I will share with you statistics which was conducted by Mobile Squares in 2013. It shows that 32% of operators were partnering with OTTs in 2012. But this number increased to 36% in a year. So more operators are partnering with OTTs. And the survey also shows that the number of mobile operators blocking the OTT services was 11% in 2012 and has dropped to 6%. So blockage is not seen as a solution. The regulatory approach is also different, and some say that according to the first approach, the OTT services is a kind of electronic communication service, and the OTTs and the network operators fight in the same market. It is also stressed that as the OTTs do not have any obligation, they can act freely and have advantages over network operators in competition. So they should have the same rights and obligation as the network operators. This is one consideration. And another view is that Internet is an open platform and the user should access whichever content they want and whichever application they want to use. This group gives the priority to the net neutrality. And the third view is about leaving it to the market dynamics. In this case, it's expected that the operators and the OTT players will sit around the table and determine the special of the services between them. At this point, I want to say what is going on around the world, and I will start with a survey result which was conducted by Eurobarometer in February of this year. It shows that 25% of European citizens are experiencing blocking of the internet content. And EU Commission finds it unacceptable, and it is studying to determine the borders of the net neutrality. And we know that the country, which is the Netherlands, determined the net neutrality rules, but hindering or slowing down the internet traffic are subject to some regulations, which is if the network has a congestion, or if there is a need to apply the court decisions, then the services of OTTs may be restricted or slowed down. In other countries, for example, in Korea, in the USA, as Mr. Chairman mentioned, in Korea, many of the other countries are the issue is under the discussion, and we have the same discussions actually in the Turkey. And although we do not have yet determined an official position, we are discussing it with the stakeholders, and we are trying to find a solution. But for now, we do not yet determine an official position for the. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Right on time. So obviously we don't have an official position. That's what we understand. But we'll come back to that when we start discussing, when the speakers finish with their presentations. Now, I would like to turn to my right and give the floor to another very important OTT operator that we all know. Lawyer counsel from Google, Aparna Sridhar. Do I pronounce it right? Yes. Okay, and she represents Google on international and domestic affairs. She's actually working on internet policy and governance issues. She previously served in a similar role at Free Press, which is an US NGO, so she has some media experience as well. She's a graduate of Harvard College and Stanford University. The floor is yours, and I would like to actually hear Google's or your personal views on how do you see OTTs, one of the largest OTT operators like Google, to identify this distinction between net neutrality, or is Google in favor of these services being taxed and have some levies on fast services? And maybe you have more knowledge on how this is handled in the US, because as I mentioned before, there are some issues with FCC and some federal appeals court. We would be happy if you could actually give us some thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I might just give a brief overview of the relationship as I perceive it first, and then I'll certainly turn to your specific questions. I think the first key point I would want to make is that content providers on the internet like Google and broadband network operators are complementary. We can't reach our end users without being able to put our content across broadband operators' networks. On the other hand, people want access to broadband network operators' services because they want to access content. They are not looking for a fat, empty bit of transmission. So I think we really need each other, and what we have seen in the tremendous growth of the internet is that there's a virtuous cycle between the demand for content and growth in networks. More demand for content spurs growth in networks, and bigger networks allow more innovative content to be created, thereby furthering the demand. So I think the first message would be we're all in this together. The second message is, I think there are a number of opportunities for us to work together on lowering barriers to entry in the telecommunications market. So for example, if there are particular bureaucratic obstacles that make it difficult to deploy infrastructure, that's something that we obviously want to minimize, because we have an interest in making infrastructure deployment as easy as possible. Similarly, I think we, as many of the mobile operators do, support increasing access to spectrum for mobile operations. Spectrum is really the lifeblood of wireless communications, and more communications are going over wireless networks. So this is definitely an area where I think we are aligned in terms of the need to improve and or reduce regulation in that space. The third point I would make, again, in the vein of we have the same goals and we're in this together, is that the challenge of connecting internet users who are not yet connected to the internet is a tremendous challenge. 2/3 of the world is still not yet connected. And that's a problem that needs a lot of investment and a lot of creative minds to solve. It's an area that we have focused a lot on, and I'll just highlight a couple different examples. One is we're working on technologies to get broadband to the hardest to reach, most remote areas. So for example, we have a project called Project Loon that uses high altitude balloons to try to deliver internet at roughly 3G speeds. By the same token, we've also invested in wholesale infrastructure. So we have a project in Kampala, Uganda called Project Link that's an attempt to deliver broadband more effectively in that city. We're obviously, some of you may be aware of our Google Fiber project, which is a project based in the US, and we're a retail broadband provider in the US, and we've really focused on improving speeds. So I think we have to work together to solve this problem of the 2/3 of the world not being connected. Finally, I would like to make the point that internet content providers invest heavily in infrastructure. So we try to bring our content 99% of the way to the end user. Often it's just carried over the last mile by the broadband network operator. Tens of billions of dollars are spent by our industry on exactly this goal. So I think that, for us, we would like to bring our content as close to the end user as possible. In general, globally, different circumstances may differ from country to country, but that's certainly an overall goal. You asked about net neutrality in the United States. And so on that question, I think the question of how to approach network neutrality rules is really it's going to be a kind of country-specific determination. So different markets may call for different rules, and some markets there may be so much competition in the market that it makes sense to take a wait-and-see approach, and some markets may be heavily concentrated, and maybe some intervention is warranted. In the U.S., we have supported open internet rules for the very last mile in which paid prioritization is not permitted. That debate is currently underway at the Federal Communications Commission. It's been, back and forth between the commission and the courts, and now it's back at the commission. And so it's really no one has perfect knowledge of how that might transpire. I just want to make one final point in response to a couple of the other speakers, which is, I think it's a fallacy to say that, content providers or over-the-top providers operate in a Wild West, Wild West being an American term, but for an environment where there's absolutely no rules. I think that's simply not the case. I mean, we have to comply with the laws of the countries in which we operate, just like everyone else does. There are plenty of regulations that apply to us, and so I think that's probably not a helpful way to talk about the issues. So with that, I'll probably turn it back to you.
Okay, very good. We saved 8 seconds, but there are some questions. I think Luigi wants to address a question to Google, or
no, it's
just
not a question, if I may. It's just a small comment.
Okay.
And because I think I appreciate a lot what Aparna was saying, the intervention of Google, and I was lucky because before my holiday I went to the Silicon Valley and I visited Google. I had the chance to have a meeting with all the staff of the project of Loon. And I think that is very interesting, the idea that Google wants to cover the whole world and to have access, to give access to everybody to the internet. And this particular case is very interesting because, as you are aware of that, this should be done with the telecom operators, and could be the first example, a big example of cooperation together of Google with some telecom operators, and we are having some discussion to do something together in order to, whether we can do and help to develop this project. Can be very, very interesting. So I appreciate a lot also what you said.
Okay. Just to actually make a few comments on Aparna's views. Basically what she's saying is we are all in this boat together. So without content, the empty big spectrum doesn't mean anything. But at the same time, I have some views on my own. As large OTT operators, there are tax issues. For example, in countries like Turkey and some other countries, there is this heavy traffic coming in and out. And these governments, I know there has been issues with operators like Google or content providers, tax issues. I mean, who is taxing Google on these OTT services that they're pushing globally? And that's something else, but that's also related to the infrastructure investments that you're making. I think what you're doing is nice. You're doing, trying to actually push internet to remote areas. But that's like a social responsibility project, I think. But at the same time, you should be also responsible for the infrastructure investments these all the other internet providers are doing. But that's something that we're going to discuss. Maybe there will be more questions coming. We'll discuss it. Sure, sure.
So I confess I'm not a tax expert, so I won't try to go down the tax road. It's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is in these issues. But I do think that, when I say we invest in infrastructure, we are truly trying to bring content as close to the end user as possible, at least globally. I'm obviously not a Turkey expert either, so you should take my words as general, but okay. But I think it's a fallacy to say, oh, we're only interested in the pie in the sky, kind of next wave of things. We're investing all the time in getting content to the user day to day. Okay,
at least we all agree that we are in the same boat, and if there should be a solution, the solution should be actually in a table where everybody sits together, like Mr. Gambardella is suggesting. There should be a hybrid solution, both coming from the OTT providers and the telecom operators. Now we have two more speakers, then we'll open the floor for discussion. Now I'm going to go back to a government representative. Replacing Mr. Atilla Çelik, we have today here Gündüz Şengül from Ministry of Transport, Maritime and Communications of Turkey. Mr. Gündüz Şengül is a graduate of Hacettepe University Electrical Engineering Department. He started to work as an engineer in Turkish Telecom. Subsequently, he has been assigned to a group chief engineer in network planning, so he has obviously technical background. Since 2012, he's been working for the Ministry of Transport and Maritime Affairs and Communication. He's the head of Electronics Communications Department in the General Directorate of Communications. And if you could give us your view on the ministry, how actually the ministry sees this issues, OTT issues, and maybe some tax issues, and network neutrality issues, and who should be responsible for regulating the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to express my great pleasure for being in such a distinguished, comprehensive event. I am trying to express our position. Today, the importance of broadband and high-speed internet is very important for all sectors. And especially the broadband also triggering the economical development and social development, of course. I would like to explain some of our policy items about broadband, first of all. We, as Ministry, carried out extensive studies about that subject with all shareholders, all the ICT sectors in Turkey. I would like to share some of our items. First, extending of ICT infrastructure and ensure competitive competition. Extending of broadband infrastructure. Promote and finance of ICT R&D projects. Increasing the number of services covered by e-government. And reasonable tariffs for end users. In the context of policy defined by Ministry, we also defined our target until the period of 2023, which is our 100th anniversary of our Republic. In these studies, we focused especially to fiber infrastructure and mobile broadband. In that study, I want to give some broadband-related targets. One of them, the clearing obstacles in infrastructure and installation, fiber optic networks, and to be an inter-exchange point in the region. Reach to 100% of household penetration with fiber and extend broadband mobile access infrastructure all over the country. We also we have studied with our national R&D institution to be talk on this subject. Now we are studying on define our policy and targets about broadband infrastructure. In order to achieve our 2023 goals, we give importance and speed up broadband investment. And it is needed to remove barriers in front of operators' investment. At this point, fiber investment is very important for both fixed and mobile networks. Then, fiber infrastructure regulations, very important. I want to give some of them. First of all, I want to divide into two sections the infrastructure. One of them is the active part, which consists of multiplexer system, cables, etc. And the other part, the passive part, which consists of pipes, ducts, etc. Regulation for active part are cable sharing and co-location. On the other hand, regulations for passive part are right-of-way, very important, and facility sharing. According to our regulatory regime, governing the relationship between operators, regulations belong to our Information and Communication Technology Authority, ICTA. But right-of-way is also consists of relationship between operators and also operators and governmental institutions, municipalities. For that reason, by the law, the regulation of right-of-way addressed to the ministry. Broadband and infrastructure investment are very important for a country's future. For realizing our goals, we believe that telcos and OTTs need each other and have to be studied closely. Because OTT trigger telcos infrastructure development and innovations by offering global services. On the other hand, telco lead to develop our OTTs innovative and broadband services. But we have to consider also the user perspective. Information society needs both of them. In other words, user perspectives have to be taken into account, and we have to be very careful on that issue. Because telco are national level actors and responsible for telecommunication regulations, invest on telecommunication backbone and also last mile. For all sectors needs which affects all human life cycles. And infrastructure operators have financial and universal service responsibilities. On the other hand, OTTs are international and global players and have no national regulatory responsibilities, but have some responsibilities at a global level. OTTs also have invest in service level, but recently we see that they also some invest in fiber infrastructure. Issues between telcos and OTTs have to be considered in a global and international level. Regulation or policies in one country with the national level are insufficient to solve level playing fields problems. Because telcos and OTTs are not at the same layer and same platform.
Zamanı bitirdik. Onun için biraz hızlı.
We as all stakeholders of sectors, policy makers, regulation authorities, telcos and OTTs should find a reasonable financial model solution which meets regulatory requirements. And we are studying on that issue inside the Ministry and Information and Communication Technologies Authority. On the other hand, we follow the debates, discussions, events, and forums about that subject very closely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Obviously, as I understand, the ministry's view is on regulation is they have the regulatory authority, as most countries do, and so that regulation issue falls in the hands of regulatory bodies. Finally, we have one more speaker. He represents one of the largest telco operators, mobile operators in Turkey. So we'd like to hear their view on network neutrality, broadband, regulation of broadband, because I know that there are some issues in Turkey regarding broadband infrastructure. Mr. Tolga Kılıç is the regulatory director of AVEA, one of the 3 mobile operators in Turkey. Prior to joining AVEA, he took office in the State Planning Organization and BTK, ICTA. So he has some regulatory office experience as well. Now he represents the private sector. He holds a degree in electronics engineering from Istanbul Technical University, and then he did his master's degree in science and technology policy and communications policy in Middle East Technical University and University of Westminster. I think this is in UK, right? London. The floor is yours. We have 7 minutes, then we're going to open up the floor for discussions, and we'll have 20 minutes for discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kemal Bey, and hello, everyone. It may not be a good idea to go to talk about history as the last speaker, but I will go back to 80s and 90s first, just to show that what we are discussing today is actually not new for the operators. We have seen a similar experience in the past, and then try to come back to today in a few minutes. So in 80s and 90s, we had, as in the telecommunications market, we had natural monopolies and nothing else. Then the technology brought some opportunities so that some guys were able to carry international traffic through other ways, and then this business got bigger and bigger, so that one day the structure collapsed in some way, and there was a new business structure, a new pricing model, which was symbolized by termination rates to be regulated by the regulatory authorities established at those dates. And then we had an imbalance between the earnings and spendings, which is actually very similar to today. So the operators had to find a way for this, which was that at the time called tariff rebalancing, saying that they had to introduce monthly rental fees to their customers just to balance their earnings from the business they have been doing. So at the time, there was a remedy for this frictional transition, and all the operators made their ways to today. So today, yeah, this was among the operators, licensed telecom operators. Today we have new players in the market which are not licensed yet. And there's a new interconnection regime today. I mean, I see some guys call the partnership between Spotify and the operators, or Netflix and the operators, as interconnection. People today call it partnership, but some old guys, including myself, call it interconnection agreements, because actually it is really an interconnection agreement in a new way. So the history repeats itself. Today we have new players, and again we have the same problem that the revenues earned from this business and the investment, the expenditure to be done, do not match. And so the sustainability of the business comes under threat, because what I mean by this, for instance, for mobile side, the cost of operating the network all over the world is around $150 billion in these days, and this will double in the next decade. It will go up to 300 billions by 2012. And in this country, for instance, the amount of the investment done by 4 big operators is around $1.7 billion. And this is not one-off, actually. If you combine the last 5 years, it is more than $10 billion. And it is not decreasing. It has to increase. It has to be sustainable. So, and the history repeats, there's a new business model, and we need a new pricing structure to go with this one. So this comes to the discussion on net neutrality, actually, because we see that this week we have seen here that everyone has an own definition of net neutrality depending on their own priorities. So, and we have mostly heard the catchy term fast lanes while talking about specialized services that we can offer to OTTs. So it seems there's a reaction to these fast lanes. Actually, in Turkish telecom industry, we are used to making analogies from transportation. It is almost like a tradition to everyone in this industry. But this time it is not only us, everyone mentions about fast lanes. And if you go back to transportation, these fast lanes, the paid service actually prevents congestion, and it creates resources for further investment of the upgrade, for further upgrade of the network. So it is having paid fast lanes simply it helps actually the sustainability of the system. So on our side, on telecom industry, trying to find out new ways, new pricing models, new business models is not to demolish the system, but it is just for healthy growing up of the system. Following the discussions here this week, if we are aiming that everyone can have a word on internet and everyone can have access to the words of other people, then we have to have a strong network. Not a fat one, but a strong one. Again, this was a concern in 90s, that when this transition happens, the investment will go to the densely populated areas, to corporate business, because the profit is only there, and there will be a huge access deficit for the rest of the customers, rest of the citizens. But this did not happen, as I mentioned, thanks to the introduction of tariff rebalancing and the way to collect, changing the way to collect money from the customers. So if we are to sustain an open internet, open net, again, we will do the same. We have to find a resource for a strong network, and when I say a strong network, it's a large, ubiquitous, and optimized network, which is not a network, not a network which is selectively deployed to certain locations with attractive titles like ultra, super fast something. For instance, in this country, the mobile operators have a coverage of 99% in terms of population for 2G, and in upcoming years, in a couple of years, for 3G, we will have the same level. So, and also these networks guarantee a certain level of quality of service to each and every customer with concrete KPIs. So this is the type of network we should pursue. Otherwise, the network itself can be a premium commodity in the near future, not a public commodity one. So in order to achieve this, we have to create a marketplace which brings together the earnings and expenditures, all the players in the same place. So yes, I agree that we are all in it together. We should be all in it together. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Tolga Kılıç. We are finished with the speakers. Let me summarize the views, then I'm going to open up the floor. Like Tolga Kılıç mentioned, there is an interesting analogy, what's happening in today's internet world with what happened 20, 25, 30 years ago in telecom industry. And also the speeds have also grown tremendously. As a personal anecdote from myself, I'm actually an academician at Boğaziçi University. I also chair the Industry Association, IT and Telecom Association of Turkey. I was personally involved in an internet connection project in the middle of 1990s in Turkey. That was the first internet, maybe the second internet connection in Turkey. The first one was in Ankara. This was back in 1996 or 1997, so it's about 14, 15 years ago. The first connection we established in Istanbul was 64 kilobit per second. So in the past 15 years, we've seen an enormous growth in the speeds. But more importantly, the technology was moving, so we had megabit speeds first, then we had gigabit speeds, and also the price of per megabit dropped significantly. I was also involved in the satellite business sector. I remember clearly selling 1 megabits of satellite capacity for $13,000 in Turkey. Now it's a few dollars. So the technology grew, but back then there was no content. So Turkey had to wait maybe 7, 8 years for content to be developed within Turkey and globally. So like most panelists today mentioned, so technology, the infrastructure is growing, but at the same time, content was growing as well. So what I understand from all the panelists, so there is no clear solution, neither in this table nor in other discussion platforms in Europe and US. Network neutrality is still something to be discussed. Before starting this session, I mentioned that I received an email yesterday saying that this host country session is a feeder session to the network neutrality, main network neutrality session. And there was also a comment that in Net Mundial in Sao Paulo, there were many discussions on network neutrality, and at the end of that forum, they referred to IGF in Istanbul that the discussions on network neutrality should be continued in Istanbul. And as I understand, these 3-4 days would be a good platform to discuss these issues, but what came out of this, at least from the panelists I see, there is no clear judgment on network neutrality. There are different sides. We've listened to government, NGOs, private operators, telecom operators, content providers. So as I understand, there is still issues to be discussed, and platforms like this is a good, opportunity to have views of everyone. And now I open the floor for questions, discussions. We have 15 minutes. Okay, there is one question back there. If you also present yourself very briefly.
Mark Sommer, I'm with a startup called Volo Broadband. We help service providers, mostly in emerging markets, to provide affordable broadband solutions to their subscribers, specifically focusing on unlicensed technologies. A few comments, maybe as food for thought to get the discussion started here. So one thing I notice in the OTT discussion is a lot that we hear service providers complain about the cost of operating the networks and the revenues they can bring in. Especially when we look at mobile networks, the operators are actually in a position to determine a lot of those costs by themselves when they auction or participate in the auctions for spectrum. They bid on the spectrum and are in a unique position to actually identify how much they want to pay for spectrum by themselves. So I think there's a little bit of looking at the industry themselves to why they bid as much as they do for spectrum to get it, and now having the problem of revenues not being in shape with what the cost of the underlying spectrum sometimes is. I think spectrum needs to be more freely available to operators. Often spectrum which is purchased isn't available to competitors, but not used by the owner of the spectrum in certain areas, and there could be a lot of the things done to alleviate that. The other part is when I look at telcos, I find it unfortunate that we see what is called OTTs like Google and Facebook, looking at alternative transmission ways using drones and balloons and so forth. I think that innovation really needs to come from the telco operators. And if it's coming from the OTTs, it's demonstrating that there's a problem, I think, in the market right now with the telcos, and we would like to see that innovation from a consumer perspective come from the telcos to think about all the kinds of ways they can reduce cost for operations on those things, and don't leave it up to their competitors or to their rivals, so to speak. And then last part, the analogy was the fast lanes and net neutrality. The problem I see there with that analogy is we don't charge the stores for the fast lanes. We charge the actual user of the fast lanes to choose if they want to pay more to get faster into the business center or back home. But we don't charge the stores, and we would find that probably pretty unfair, because the small business who's a baker or a butcher would not be able to compete with the large department store who can pay for that, like Walmart. And I think that's the exact problem we see with fast lanes, where companies like Google and Facebook can pay for those, but the startups cannot pay for those. And that's a very big imbalance we're all worried about in the net neutrality discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. There were comments, not questions, so anybody would like to add?
Yes,
okay, Luigi.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much.
It's not working, I think.
It's working?
Yeah, now it's working. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. But I think that when you discuss about, we discuss about innovation, the problem is not only the problem of telecom operators. Maybe it's a problem of, if, for example, you see the difference that is between Europe and US, and in particular, if you visit the Silicon Valley, you understand why there it is much easier to promote innovation. Now, innovation should not be exclusivity of anybody, but if someone has a good idea and is capable to innovate, we should use this innovation. As far as I know, Loon doesn't work without the cooperation of telecom operator. So in this case, could be really a win-win solution. Then I agree with you, it would be good also to have, maybe from our side also, let me tell, from European innovations. But the problem of innovation is not only a problem of the telecom operator as such, is a problem, for example, of our region, that Europe is lag behind and we are not capable to innovate as we should. But let's be pragmatic. If there are good idea, if there are innovation, let's try to see how we can use and we can benefit from them.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Okay, two more there. We don't, okay, yeah.
Thank you. I listened carefully and enjoyed the contributions from everyone on the panel.
Can you present yourself?
My name is Hisham Abul Yazid. I work with the Egyptian Regulatory Authority. And actually one thing I expected from this session, which I hope I didn't miss. When we talk about OTTs, we often just look at that in contrast with the issues of net neutrality. And here I want to bring my question, which might be a little bit different than the approach. What is exactly the framework that governs OTTs in terms of their services that is offered to the customer? I wish to see the matter of OTTs presented from the perspective of consumer protection. Most of the services of companies like Google, Facebook are free, but even free services, they don't come with without responsibilities. I mean, some of them are regarding privacy, protection of data, and other services that are actually commercial. Google, they have some paid services, so as Facebook. So where does the customer go when they have a problem with one of these services from the perspective of consumer protection?
I think that's an interesting issue, but I don't know if that has anything to do with network neutrality, consumer protection. I don't know if you have anything. Maybe a representative from Google may say a few words.
So I think consumer protection comes from a variety of different sources. One is obviously the law. Other is public norms about what we expect from corporations, etc. I actually think that there is an important sort of consumer angle to the network neutrality debate, and it's why so many consumer groups have been active in the network neutrality debate, which is that the fundamental goal is to make sure that individual users and both generators of content on the internet as well as consumers of content, and with the internet many people can be both a consumer and a generator of content, that people have the right to reach content of their choice and to create content of their choice to be delivered to other end users. So I think that the relationship between network neutrality and consumer protection is strong.
Thank you. I think there, as I understand, end of these discussions, it turns out that there are many angles to this issue. Like our friend suggested, there are issues with the consumer protection. And there were suggestions in the past having these fast lanes or two-tier structure, economy class and business class. It's like an analogy in the airline industry, right? If you like to pay premium, then you fly business class. If you pay less, you fly economy. But then there are actually some issues in that model as well, because in the plane you have a certain area restricted with business class and economy. So you're not using the whole spectrum. So it's like this demand and supply issue, and the economics should be there, so we cannot avoid the economics. Someone is actually investing. There's no free lunch. So as I understand, there are many issues here: economics, consumer protection, fair competition, and I think there will be more discussions on this issue. And we have, I think, time for one last question. Okay, I have to pick, yeah. Let's get the lady. Sorry, maybe I'll get you as well. Okay.
Thank you, Rosalind Layton, Aalborg University. I just would like to...
We cannot hear you clearly.
Rosalind Layton, Aalborg University.
Okay.
I work with our engineering department, and I would just like to make a point from an engineering perspective, which I think is important for this discussion. This whole debate we have about fast lanes and slow lanes, I think, is rather misplaced. It's important to remember that the original TCP/IP protocols had differentiation of service built in, priority bit, urgent bit, quality of service, type of service. And all kinds of OTTs today are availing themselves to a variety of technologies that help them speed their data to end users. At my university, we have a startup called Media at Hand, which specializes in video compression, and this can help the delivery of data to take half as much bandwidth. And so most of the world's content is poorly encoded. This is another challenge for operators, that they have to deliver lots of data that's poorly encoded. You can improve your user experience and by improving the coding of data. So I think this idea of fast lanes is kind of a way to scare people, and it's not exactly true. But today, media companies, content companies all over the world are using priority systems to ensure that their video gets delivered well. E-commerce companies want to make sure that their credit card transactions get through. And there's all kinds of technologies that are being deployed to do this, and a huge innovation ecosystem of startups assisting in this area. So I would just say that an idea that a small startup has to have an access to a fast lane, first of all, I would love to see that actually happen, because the outrage would be immediate, and there's no operator I know would be so stupid to try to block a company that would do that. And immediately we have all kinds of areas through competition law, at least in the West, where we could stop it. So I think it's important we bring in these engineering perspectives and also look at the startup community that is facilitating speeding of content through innovative solutions.
Very good, actually. That brings a very interesting angle as we sit here today, discuss these issues, network neutrality, fast lanes, slow lanes. As I I know myself as well, there are actually technical solutions, differentiation of TCP/IP, and as far as I know, like this lady suggested as well, a lot of companies are using such services.
I'd just like to briefly respond. I think we should be careful about what we're talking about, right? So video compression is something that's a very useful technology. It's used by the content provider to make their content more accessible. That's very different than an operator making choices about which content is delivered more slowly. I also think when we're talking about prioritization, the key sort of issue with prioritization is that it's most useful when there's congestion. So you would only pay for a fast lane if your bits weren't going at the rate of speed of everyone else. If there were a queue, so to speak, then having a fast lane is important. If there's no queue and there's available bandwidth for everyone, then there's no incentive to use a fast lane. So I think there's a bit of a problem with monetizing scarcity associated with these fast lanes. On the other hand, it would be very great for all of us if we could focus, rather than focusing on fast lanes and slow lanes, if we could focus on bigger lanes for everyone so that everyone's content can get to the end user as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I think there is one more comment here, but I think what she was suggesting or referring to is not only video compression, but there are differentiation and prioritization techniques at the very low level. So some companies are trying to use them as we speak, I think, right?
That was my point, actually. It is not about the compression of video by the OTT players. The operators and the vendors always try to develop new protocols to manage the traffic carefully, to manage the traffic effectively, and today many people are working on these issues, and this is on the operator side, and the OTT players do not care about it, do not follow this.
Right.
It seems this is a field to be regulated in the near future.
Yeah. So operators actually try to save themselves or try to actually prioritize the traffic. Okay, one last question, then there was a gentleman there, then we close the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm representing from India, an association called ACTO. It was more of a general comment than any question as such. And I think the ecosystem today between the operators and the vendor community and the technology companies kind of changing a lot, where the operators are coming in, falling in the zone of data center or cloud and M2M. Similarly, companies like Google, Microsoft are getting into the space of the operators as such, and that's where the regulation versus unregulated kind of comes in, where the rules of the regulations are not same for similar kind of a service. So when you're offering a service like voice or SMS or any other things, the rules and regulations are much different for an operator versus the rules and conditions for an operator like an OTT, like things like security or things like encryption, the monitoring requirement as such. So that's where the challenge lies from an operator's perspective, not just to comply with his conditions, and also to comply with the services which are being offered over his network as such. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I think our time is up. I would like to thank you all for coming. That was a fruitful session. I hope we achieved our goals. And I hope that the network neutrality session, the main session, will certainly get some positive feedback from this session. Thank you all.
Mesaj atıp gelecekti, gelemedi. SMS attım, dedim bekliyoruz dedim, gelemedi. Görüşürüz.